Just continue talk.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for joining this afternoon's Cuppa Club with Chris and Brendan from Stockwood Community Benefit Society and Ben Wrigley from Resonance. My name's Paul Pizzala, and I'm an investment manager at Ethex, the direct impact investing platform. And I've been working with Chris, Brendan, and Ben to launch Stockwood's community share offer. So before we get started, there's a little bit of housekeeping to do. And I'd like to let you know that the Cuppa Club is recorded, that this is not a financial promotion, and that if you do need financial advice, please talk to your financial advisor. As many of you will know, the Cuppa Club runs for about 45 minutes, and it's really a fantastic opportunity to ask questions, dig into the detail a little bit, and understand why Stockwood is such an impactful organization. They've been around for a long time. They know what they're doing. It's a fantastic organization. And also ask questions from the team. That's Chris, Brendan, and Ben, about how they aim to achieve their goals. So, we really do encourage you to ask questions. Pop them in the chat box. We'll weave that into the conversation or take those questions as we go along towards the end. So to refresh, the product on offer is an investment in community shares, the target interest rate of 5%. The investment is being used to replace relatively expensive bank debt, to increase Stockwood's membership, the society, and most importantly, of all being able to focus on achieving their impact goals and building on the incredible work that this business, this farm, has already achieved. So without any further ado, I'll ask Chris, Brendan, and Ben to kindly introduce themselves, and then we'll get into the questions.
Good afternoon and welcome, and thank you all so much for coming to the Cuppa Club and hearing the story of Stockwood, and asking the questions that I'm sure will be very interesting at the end. So I'm Chris Burdett. I am the Chief Executive of the Society. I've been part of the Society in one way or another since its foundation back in 2013. 2014, the Society really got going. Yes, I've farmed the land and now the Chief Executive.
Great, thanks, Chris. And over to you, Brendan.
Yeah, hi, thank you. I'm Brendan Parsons. I'm the administrator for the Society. I've been working with the Society for, well, since about Easter, I suppose. But I've been involved with the farm for quite some time, a good few years. I've got a background in publishing, and I also work part-time for the Soil Association as a farming advisor.
Brilliant, excellent. And I'm sure your rich, deep connection with Stockwood will unfold as the conversation continues, Brendan. And Ben, if you could kindly introduce yourself, please.
Thanks, Paul, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ben Wrigley. I work at a social impact investment company called Resonance Limited, and we work closely with Stockwood around helping them with financing to grow their impact. Work with them on several share offers now, including the latest one that we're talking about today.
Brilliant, thanks for that. So I'm going to kick off with the first question, and I'm going to ask Chris to introduce the history of Stockwood, what makes up the Community Benefit Society, i.e. the different activities that happen at Stockwood, why you've joined in particular, Chris, what attracted you to the organization, and set the scene for us regards the community share offer.
Excellent, thank you very much. So yes, Stockwood Community Benefit Society was really formed to solve a family problem in the first instance, and a family problem of succession in farming businesses. And as a result, it has brought about an interesting way at looking at asset ownership and community. A shared ownership of an asset like farmland brings about a powerful community of people of all sorts of backgrounds for good, and empowers people and community to drive and help to contribute to solve some of the bigger problems in today's world. So that was, one problem led to many solutions, if you like. So I have prepared a bit of a spiel, because this is obviously my first Cuppa Club, so forgive me. I am going to go through it, and then as we get through, we can get into the more detail.
Yeah, great. That's great, Chris. Crack on.
Cool.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Climate change is perhaps the biggest challenge on the agenda today. The family who started Rush Farm wanted to try and make sure that this land was farmed in the most environmentally sustainable way in perpetuity. We believe that farming the land biodynamically is the best regenerative way of farming, and in addition, it goes some way to doing our collective bit for the planet. But that's not all. Stockwood has a blended business model of business units and farmland. The business units are an important part of the jigsaw, as these units are the main revenue generators. But how do we have business units that are environmentally sustainable? Well, redundant farm buildings were converted into offices and small warehouses. The biggest energy use of these buildings is heating in the winter months. So to try and make sure we are doing as much as possible on our eco-environmental path, we installed a district heating system using ground source heating. A network of pipes was installed to each unit, and to drive the heat pumps, an array of solar panels were installed as well. On top of this, we want to share with people what we do and to learn from others so that we can do more to benefit people and community. We welcome people to come and experience the farm and the gardens, either for a day or for weeks as volunteers. As a community grows, so too our activities. Stockwood Community Benefit Society's business park is a place where businesses can thrive, but the business park and farm is also a place for businesses and individuals to come and connect with and learn from nature, helping to support others to be more mindful of the world and we live in the world we live in, and how we can bring about change. A place for people to put resources in for the greater good of us all. We want more people and organizations to join our mission and for them to benefit from it, not only financially, but also environmentally and socially. By replacing the bank debt that we've talked about earlier with community equity, we'll be able to make a step change in the society's infrastructure and impact, improving the business park and developing social activities, as well as increasing our social impact through developing community building projects. So that was my written bit. Paul asked me why I came to Stockwood. Well, I am from Africa. I was born and bred in Zimbabwe, and we farmed in Africa. And what was interesting for me is the farm that we were a part of was almost like a small town. There were 300 people that were employed on the farm. It was a slightly bigger farm than Stockwood. It was 500 hectares, but 300 people were employed on that farm, and the dependence on the farm was about 1,500 people. We had a little school. We had a farm shop, we had a place for people to drink beer at the weekend and what have you. And so the idea of community has been with me all my life in different forms. And so moving to the UK and coming to this farm in particular was very interesting. My family have always farmed biodynamically. So biodynamic farming was never a question for me. That's a way of life for me. And we really understood what it can do and the benefits that it showed in that will. So in my formative years, I was brought up with that. So coming to Rush Farm and the business park, it made total sense for me. And the idea of this model is a no-brainer for me. We've got biodynamic farming that increases organic matters and soils. We have a system that we build our own fertility, and the farm works as a holistic organism. And bringing business into it is also incredibly important, because business is everywhere, and it's what we need to do. So having this model that Stockwood has got in terms of the business units, which is the revenue generator, and being able to support the farm and agriculture, as everyone knows, it's whether you're conventional or otherwise in this country, it's difficult to do farming in this country. But so that can support the farm, but equally it supports individuals as well. We have given a return to people on their investments over the last 9 years, and it's an opportunity for communities to come together and feel the shared ownership and a shared goal in life, a shared belief. And there's not, they don't make any more land, as they say. So we've got to share it around. And having people to have access to green space is really important. And I think that was really highlighted over the COVID period. I was very lucky. I was on the farm for the COVID period, but I often thought about those poor people in cities, in flats, in high-rise buildings, who were only able to leave their houses in those lockdowns for short periods of time. And it reminded me about why Stockwood exists. We need to double down on that. And those people who live in those places must have access to green and pleasant lands where nature is so important to human life and human health. And so above all, Stockwood is to do our little bit to do those things for people.
Brilliant. That's excellent, Chris. Really appreciate the way that you brought your passion, your knowledge, your experience, your formative years to the farm. It really speaks volumes, the way that you talk about it, to bring it alive as a holistic organism where you can combine both business, farming, renewable energy, community, nature. So very powerful to hear that from you. And I'm going to turn to Brendan, because he carries the name Parsons, which has been associated with Stockwood. You do, with Stockwood, and you're the next generation. I'm not sure if you farm and manage the land, but I'm assuming you have a very active role in what goes on.
Yeah.
It could be a future stakeholder and trustee of the land. So
very much so.
Yeah. So can you tell us, why the community aspect is so important to the long-term success of the farm, and maybe expand upon some of the points that Chris has already made about what it offers to the local community? Yeah,
of course. So I like Chris have been living and breathing these community-based ideas since I was a little kid, really. But it was this idea that I grew up around. The family succession issue that you touched on earlier was my family's succession. So it's enabled me to carry on being involved with the project, but equally my grandparents' ideals would still continue whether or not I was interested. That would be by the by, but I am, so wonderfully I'm able to be a part of the society and get involved. I think Chris touched on it a little bit. that agriculture is really at a bit of a crisis point at the moment, and I see this a lot when I go and visit more conventional farms. The food system is pretty broken, if we're honest about it, and we need to be able to eat organic food, local food, seasonal food, and we need those things for our own health, for the health of our countryside, and of course for the health of the planet, what with food miles and intensive agriculture in other countries, etc. And food security, I mean, not to bring things down, but I was reading an article earlier today predicting civil unrest due to food insecurity in this country. So it's really important that we can protect our food system. However, people are quite disconnected. They think it comes from a supermarket, a plastic bag, whatever. Even people who live in the countryside can find farming a confusing and mysterious thing. So what does community have to do with all of those problems? Well, firstly, for the farm, if we're able to sell all of our food to local markets with genuine human interactions at the point of sale, then we're protecting our market, and we do that here with various relationships we have with other local farm shops and like-minded organizations, and we really appreciate that. And secondly, for the community, the peace of mind of knowing where your food's coming from, the huge health benefits which become clearer every week. There's a new scientific study which shows how important it is to eat good food, good local food. It just tastes better. I mean, come on, it hasn't been on a lorry all the way up 200 miles to a processing plant, and then another 200 miles to a packing plant, and then another 200 miles to a supermarket. It's just come straight from the farm. Yeah, and obviously mental health, Chris touched on access to land, for communities to be engaged positively with like-minded people, whether it's a community of place, a community of ideas, with our events here that we have. It's just great. It's great to be involved. And then there's a sort of third point, the volunteering aspect. So we love to have woofers, the worldwide organic, whatever it is. Anyway,
willing workers on organic farms.
That's the one. We just call them woofers, and it's they to have these people come and bring new ideas to the farm. I mean, that helps us grow, it helps us develop. They help us run the place. They help contribute good hard work, which is really satisfying. And so yeah, there's just so much. I suppose
Brilliant.
I could sort of just finally
you
say,
could I imagine you could wax lyrical for
oh
another,
God, hours and
50.
hours. Can you tell?
Well, it's fantastic to see that energy being a part of the farm, Stockwood Rush Farm, and got some really interesting questions coming through actually. So I sort of encourage for us to have a look at the question from Winston, and we can sort of feed that into the conversation as we go along. But there are a couple of questions, one from Lucy, one from Christopher, which I hope Ben can wrap up into the next question that I'm going to ask him. So Lucy asks, what's the reason for the refinancing? And Christopher asks, actually, I might kind of put that back to Chris and Brendan actually. But what is the £300,000 raise going to be spent upon? So if you can bear those in mind, Ben. First of all, fantastic that Resonance is continuing to support community share offers and has been on the journey with Stockwood for many years now. And and FX is, very keen to support particularly high impact offers like Stockwood, because we understand the importance of sustainable farming, community, getting that model really out there into the marketplace. So not only can Stockwood thrive, but other organizations can see that it works, and it can ride through the tough times like COVID too, which is a real testament to the resilience of the team and the business model. So well done, guys. So from a financial perspective, Ben, can you tell us how the business part, renewable energy generation, and the biodynamic farming all add up to a resilient and sustainable business, and sort of wrap that up with why are we having a community share offer today?
Yeah, absolutely, and it's a good point. Resonance has been involved with Stockwood for a long time, and certainly before. I mean, I've been at Resonance for 8 years, but before that, with our chief executive Daniel Brewer, working closely with Sebastian, Brendan's father, around the model for succession and creating this really exciting structure to both guarantee that and deliver for the community and make sure that the land stays in good hands and is farmed biodynamically in perpetuity. So really happy to be involved, and it's around that impact and community. But fundamentally also, and to answer your question, Stockwood is also a very profitable business. Frankly, COVID had a significant impact on the business park, as you would imagine, right, with people working from home and so on, and the stress it put on various businesses, and that really affected rents and other revenue at the business park in 2021 and into 2022. But that core business is now recovered. The business park is fully let, allowing us to prudently forecast, return to the levels of revenue that were achieved historically. So that's around rents, that's around service charges and other business park income, and the renewable energy income has also held steady through that period and will remain so. So the core business has recovered. So profitability before financing is really strong, but frankly, base rate since then. So when the farm was bought, it was bought with a mixture of community shares and senior debt, which at that time was priced reasonably, allowing the farm to be put into community hands. As everyone knows, that's changed. That's fundamentally what the refinancing is about at this point. Got a very strong now core business. By restructuring the financing and making sure that it's owned by the community rather than the bank, we'll also have a business that's sustainable and resilient and can continue to generate the maximum returns for those community shareholders. If you want me to answer as well specifically those two questions around, so that I think I've answered the question around the refinancing. This is about changing the balance between equity and debt for the long term, maximizing community investment, involvement, and shareholdings, so that Stockwood can consistently generate a profit to make those returns to shareholders, and importantly, then go on to the next stage in terms of the impact it generates.
Yeah, it's a sort of a triple whammy. Sorry, Ben, you were going to say. Apologies.
I was just going to very quickly, Paul, answer the question around the £300,000. So that's the target for the share offer. It's important to point out that there's real ambition over several phases and over the next 2 years to fundamentally change that balance of ownership. But in terms of the initial target of £300,000, that would be used just to start paying down some of that short-term debt and loan stock, change the balance between debt and equity.
Yeah, brilliant. So there's long-term refinancing in place to replace shorter-term debt and very expensive bank debt with reasonably priced community shares, and that allows the core business to produce the cash flows to pay back all community shareholders eventually. So it is a stepwise program, but more and as importantly to allow Chris, Brendan, and the team at Stockwood to really focus on the impact goals. So just wanted to weave a couple of questions back into this conversation for Chris and Brendan. Maybe take Winston's question first. Is the farm plan influenced by the biodynamic techniques in southern Africa or a variety of other countries, i.e. the United States? So it sounds like we've got somebody who knows what they're talking about there. And then Christopher says, so the farm would no longer be a family farm. Maybe we can just sort of clear that up a little bit. And is there a preference for the investor members to come from the local area, or does that not matter? So quite a lot of in there for you guys to think and talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. So to answer the biodynamic techniques first, so I think the techniques are involved from all over the world. In our early days, we were very lucky to have New Zealand biodynamic farm advice professions where there's always something to learn about. And actually, just before we went live with this, we were talking with Paul about soil biology and how that's changing the way farmers think about how they manage their crops conventionally and organically, biodynamically. Soil biology is a very, very important part of our planet's health. And I love that Peter Proctor was someone who when he first came, as I said, and we were talking about soil health and what have you, he picked up a handful of soil and he said, in this handful of soil, there are more living organisms than there are people on the planet. And that says something about what biology should be under our feet and how farming goes. So yes, we draw experiences from all over the place. And there's always a farmer down the road who has a good idea, and we will borrow it. In terms of investors from the local area and what doesn't matter, for me, it doesn't matter where people are coming from. It's about the mission. It's about proving that not necessarily proving, but it's about building communities together. No matter the background of people, no matter their interests and what have you, but it is about creating something better for the planet, better for people and better for communities. So shared ownership for me is important. We don't need individuals owning loads of assets around the world and being the richest men. That's not my path. It's not what I believe in, and I don't believe it's what is good for people. People need something to hang their hats on, and if they can be part of an organization like this and it fulfills some of their social aspirations, great. We're an open farm for wherever you come from. We do have some overseas investors in our current membership, and we've been lucky enough for some of those people to actually come and spend some time on the farm with us. So yes, would it no longer be a family farm? So no, it's a community farm, but the family who are part of it or who have set it up and what have you are the current farmers. And for as long as they want to be the current farmers, then I think that's fine. But on the day that they decide that farming's not for them or what have you, then it's up to the society to find the next farm. And whether that's from, within the family generations, that's fine. If it's not, that's fine too. People can come forward and take it on. The important thing is that this farm remains as an environmentally conscious farm in perpetuity and does its bit for making a better planet.
So if I were to take over the farm and think, right, that's enough of all of that, I'm going to get a huge tractor and spray everything with glyphosate, then the society would say, no, thank you, and we'll find someone else, which is, important.
Yeah, I think it's I really like the way you've collapsed the complexity of governance into a very simple way of thinking about life, Brendan. So I think it's important to understand that, isn't it? That the society provides a governance check and balance for the mission of the society and how land is farmed and what it does. So great to hear that. I kind of almost feel like Christopher should have a conversation with Chris and Brendan, because he's asking some very kind of pertinent questions. I think, how many paid full-time staff are there? I think that's actually quite a good question to understand how an organization like Stockwood can treat its employees and create meaningful and well-paid work for them. So perhaps you could touch on that one for us.
Absolutely. So I think so Stockwood Community Benefit Society is the owner of the business park and the farmland. The farmland is farmed by a company called Rush Farm Limited, and so structurally, to be quite clear about this, is the farmland is tenanted, but the agreement of that tenancy with Stockwood Community Benefit Society and Rush Farm Limited is that it fulfills the aims of the society, as we've been discussing earlier, in terms of biodynamic farming and all of that. So to answer the specific question, how many paid full-time staff? The question, so the answer to that question is, in terms of staff in the current structure, equivalent of probably one person full-time, although there's 3 of us do it part-time, on the Stockwood CBS side of things, so managing the business park, tenant roles, and day-to-day accounts, etc. Rush Farm, on the other hand, has its own employees, and there's one full-time employee on the farm, and again 3 or 4 part-time employees on the farm that help deliver these aims for the society. Have I made a hash of that answer, or does it make sense?
No, it's perfect. So the CBS employs effectively 3 people part-time, you, Brendan and Nikki, and then the farm, which is a tenant, has its own separate employees too. Yeah. So I think that's pretty clear.
But also the agreement between the society and the farm is an important one, and is one that will obviously the CBS maintains and correctly goes into perpetuity in those aims.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got some great questions coming through here. Winston says, what do you see as the most significant operational threats to the business plan over the next 12 to 18 months? Will the new money raised be used to address those issues, or does that come from budgets raised from the existing revenues? Then he says, no more questions from me.
Oh, Winston, we like your questions.
Chris and Ben, do you want to take that one, please?
You want to go first, Ben, or shall I?
Up to you, Chris. Maybe talk about the business, and then I could.
Yeah. So operationally, we've I think we've alluded already that that COVID put a real big dampener on rent roll, and that's purely because businesses were working from home and they didn't need office space, and the world was a very uncertain time. There was a delayed reaction to it because of the way leases work, etc. So we're back up to fully let business park now, and those are in leases. The leases run between 3 and 6 years, and we have about 20% of those leases expiring each year, where we either renew the lease or bring new people in. So we're not anticipating anything in terms of operational headwinds, but I have to caveat that is I'm not a politician, and I certainly can't control the macro economy of energy prices, etc., etc. But from our point of view, we've got a good set of businesses in place in the business units, and they do have leases with us for significant periods of time. In terms of how will the money be used, the money that we're trying to raise here is really to reduce loan stocks and bank debt. I think that's the sort of straightforward and simple answer to that. It's relatively expensive money. It's interest payment to loan stock, slightly different, but certainly in bank debt, it's interest payments to a bank. Forgive me the figures, but this year there's been a massive amount of interest payments to a bank, and actually for me that should be for the community. I think we're going to be topping out at about £120,000 worth of interest payments this year, and that pot of money should be for the community, in my mind.
Thanks. So it's in a way it's a simple debt for community asset swap. Ben, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for Stockwood directly, but for my analysis of the business, as I mentioned, that the core business is really, really strong. I don't see any operational threats given the recovery post COVID. If there's any threat, it's from the financing, not from the operations that are very sound.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, I don't think we need to dwell on it. There is a lot of really excellent financial modelling in the offer document, which tells the story very clearly in terms of what the organisation is aiming to achieve and what it needs to get there. So really would encourage everybody to download the offer document, check out the offer, get onto the Ethex website, download the offer document, have a look at the financials. If you've got further questions, feel free to direct them to Ethex or directly to Stockwood, and we'll take those questions. More questions the better. But I think it's very clearly explained in the offer document what Chris, Brendan and his team are trying to achieve. So really would encourage your engagement with that.
Very briefly, Paul, I could say just on a couple of those questions. Sorry if you don't mind me jumping in. That the value of the farm and the assets is substantially above that of the debt and equity combined. So that also is, there's a strong balance sheet there, particularly with restructuring. It really is just the cost of interest, isn't it? Which we think is, we know is running currently at nearly 9%, 8.5%, 8.75%, given the rise in base rates, which is putting pressure on all sorts of social enterprises and community enterprises, right? This is not a problem for Stockwood. It's a problem across the sector at the moment, and one that needs to be resolved.
Absolutely. And they also, for folk who aren't familiar with community shares, there are sort of different ways you can get your money back. I think it's fair to say that it's patient capital. It does pay an interest, but you can also, it pays the interest of target 5%, but you can also get your capital back over time as well. So Ben, I think it'd be useful if you could just spend a minute or two telling people how you get your money back in the long term.
Well, getting money back from any community benefit society is through withdrawals and making a request for withdrawal. And Stockwood has, to the best of its ability, honoured all of those requests, over the years, except where there have been very short-term cash flow issues. Again, during this really just the period after COVID. This restructuring is, going to allow Stockwood, as Chris and Brendan and we've all said, to meet its continue to meet its obligations to shareholders, both in terms of delivering a reasonable return, 5% is the target return for next year, and allowing people to withdraw their capital over time as well. I'm seeing some specific questions coming up, and Paul, sort of over to you on those. I'm happy to pick those up. They're all in the model in the share offer document, but I can absolutely pick those up around of debt, profit cover, all of those. It's just whether it's best on this call or
Yeah, no, let's noted questions from Christopher. He's really kind of digging into the financials, but I think it would be sort of good to switch back to the impact and the impact story. And I'm gonna ask Brendan, can you explain what is biodynamic farming in a nutshell? Yeah, and so I'll give you some clues how it encourages biodiversity, soil health, and makes for better food production. What's the
Well,
3 or 4 things that biodynamic farming do?
Of course, and forgive me, Winston, I think you probably know quite a lot of this already. But yeah, I mean, biodynamics, it's not very well known in this country. You might have heard of it from winemaking. It's quite popular in that industry. It's in a nutshell, the sort of European peasant farming technique that has evolved over thousands of years. You may have heard of planting with the moon and things like that, but in terms of farm scale biodynamics, it really comes down to using the compost preparations, which are like micro fungal bombs. They just fill the soil with amazing fungi and that kind of thing, and really just treating the farm as a holistic organism, making sure that you pay attention to every aspect, because every aspect is linked. We want to have nice fat cows, we need to grow grass. We want to grow grass, we need to have insects to pollinate that grass. We need to have good soil organic matter, then we need to have cows. And if you are doing it right, and you obviously never get it completely right, but you always try and do your best, and you look at your farm and you walk the fields and you look at the hedges, and then you will end up with a thriving organism filled with wildlife. I mean, we went for a walk this morning and there were field fares bursting out of the hedges because they're laden with hawthorn berries and sloes. There are hares running across the fields, deer, all of these things. Humans love to get involved and fix each individual problem, and that's sort of what happens with conventional farming, and biodynamics just makes you take a step back and become more of a steward, I suppose. That's a very broad overview. You could go on for hours about the compost preparations and doing things at the right time of year and that kind of thing, but those, a good biodynamic farm will be sequestering carbon like mad, because that's just what soil does, that's what growing things do, and it will be filled with wildlife, etc., etc. It's important to not get up on a soapbox, isn't it?
I think that's such a brilliant explanation, the way that you've walked us through that. And I mean, I would definitely encourage people to go and visit Stockwood and see it for themselves, what a thriving, flourishing farm looks like. And sometimes I think we give things names, don't we, like biodynamic, but actually it's, in some ways, it's just using the best of nature to do what nature does.
And sorry to jump in again. I mean, that is, we talk about the farm a lot. It's only one aspect. There's the woofers. So we have very in-depth volunteering that helps people make a real, it can make a real difference to people's lives to spend such a long time learning about things. And obviously we get to learn from them too. We have a play school forest group that come in a few times a week. Obviously in winter it's a little bit more difficult with the weather, but to enable those local toddlers to come and spend time in the woods and learn about how to play outside that they might not ordinarily get. The lambing days that we run, other biodynamic colleges come and visit us, and we just absolutely love to welcome people, and the business park itself. We have we put on a couple of days for people who work on the business park so that they can see what's going on. You know, a lot of them come from nearby towns and don't really, they might not have big gardens, they certainly don't farm. So it just shows them how food is made. And yeah.
Sorry, just on the volunteering side as well, it's not just volunteering that happens at Rush Farm. We have well, this year we had 2 vet students come and spend some time from us that are doing a veterinary degree, and they've come to the farm to see how we do things to, you know, to help them on their education. Antibiotics, as everyone knows, is a big subject at the moment, and how we use them responsibly, and we go some way to trying to answer those questions. I'm not saying that we don't use antibiotics. We do use antibiotics when it's needed and animal welfare is in question. But you know, part of that farm experience where people come, whether it's for professional reasons or curiosity, it's to just try and ask those questions of how we can do things in a way that keeps the planet happy. And equally, it's always wonderful having people about, because they ask you a question in a different way and you think, I haven't quite thought about that. Maybe we should do this or that or whatever. So
Brilliant.
you know, that's where that community is so important.
Brilliant. Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much. And we've had our 45 minutes. I'm gonna wrap up now. It's been an absolutely, you know, real tour de force to hear your passion and your expertise, you know, wrapped up into this offer. I think it's absolutely fantastic.
I do have to answer Lucy's question. We are definitely organic. In a cheeky way, I describe biodynamics farming is organic on steroids.
But without the steroids, of course. That's brilliant. No, thank you so much for that. I'm gonna leave it there. It's been an absolutely fantastic session. Thanks to Chris, Brendan, Nikki Bainbridge in the background as well, and of course to Ben. And thanks so much to the audience for participating. The offer is live on Ethex's website. We encourage you to take a look at that. Yeah. So thanks once again for your time, and just remains for the gentleman here to say goodbye. And
before you do go, there's just one last thing I wanted to say. Sadly, I can't see anyone here. You've all had to look at my ugly face. I do apologize for that. But in the community, in the share offer document, there is a link to our website or whatever. And if you do want to come and see the farm or whatever, please make contact with us, and we'll happily take you for a farm walk.
Oh, you're on. Yeah.
Brilliant. Sorry. I was just sort of a bit cat-handed there with my left hand, but brilliant. Thank you so much, everybody. It's been a fantastic session with Stockwood, and thank you for attending. And we'll call that a wrap. Thank you.
That's great. Bye. Thank you very much, all. Cheers for now.
Bye bye.